welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Yen, the Executive Director at the Volta Foundation. Today's conversation is about rewriting the battery startup playbook. We'll talk about the lessons that we've learned collectively in the past decade as an industry, and starting the conversation to perhaps creating a roadmap, or at the very least, a hitchhiker's guide to success for battery companies starting up today and in the future. I'm incredibly honored to be joined by 4 founders from leading-edge battery startups to share their experiences and lessons learned. We'll talk about the evolving business models of battery companies, how to efficiently scale, operational excellence, and so much more. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists to join us. So with us today, we have Eric Mo, the CEO of Glimpse, Jonathan Tan, CEO from Coreshell, Jungwoo Lee, CEO from South8 Technologies, and Chiru Gopal, CTO of Mitra Chem. Let's start by introducing you and your companies. So I'll ask each of the founders to please take 5 minutes and share with us what your company is building, how the company got started and the journey that you've been on, and a lesson that you've learned that you would like to share with, oh my goodness, the 250 people in the audience today. So let's start with Eric.
Awesome, thanks, Yen. Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I was talking to Yen a few months ago, and I was everyone complaining about the industry and how it's doing, and so I thought we kind of want to have a webinar where it's a little less doom and gloom and talk about why some of us at least are excited about the prospect of the industry. So excited about the discussion. So it's great to meet everyone. My name is Eric. I'm one of the 3 co-founders, along with Peter and Patrick at Glimpse, and I'm the CEO. So we started Glimpse 2.5 years ago after spending a few years at Tesla. Peter and I started a few years at Tesla. And at Tesla, we realized that battery quality is probably a under-discussed bottleneck to the electrification of everything, and that it was not addressed enough, and it was creating a lot of downstream cost, right? And so you think about recalls, you think about failures in the field, and so on. And so we wanted to give it our best shot to enable battery quality at scale. And so the technology we built at Glimpse is leveraging both existing and breakthrough X-ray technology to essentially build a quality management solution for the battery industry to control the quality of their cells at scale and very precisely. So we've built a software, mostly software layer. There's a little bit of hardware involved in what we do, but mostly a software solution that allows to run CT scanners at very high speed, and then store that data and then extract as much information from that data and then serve it to our customers. So our customers are both battery producers and battery buyers. So the buyers would be OEMs who source cells and build those cells into packs. Buyers use our solution for incoming quality control, qualification, failure analysis, and so on. And then the producers use our solution for inline quality control, end-of-line quality control, and when it happens, unfortunately, also field failures or failure analysis from cells that return from the field that failed in the field. And so yeah, we raised our Series A back in December of 2024, last year, and excited to share about what the journey has been so far.
And Eric, what is one lesson that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, let's see. I will say, so this is my first company. I worked in large corporations before starting Glimpse, and I've learned that as a founder, your gain in terms of when you process news is very high, right? So every bad news is really, really bad, and at least personally, will depress me for more than it should, hours or days. And then every good news is incredible. I'm super excited, and I'm probably too excited about those. And so my gain, the amplitude of what a bad news feels versus what it should feel, and what the good news feels versus what it should feel is very high. And I found that it's sometimes hard to handle the because you go from it's a roller coaster of emotions as a founder, and I wish my gain was a little I was could be able to keep my head cool during good news and my chin up during bad news. And I think I need to learn how to do that. I'm curious about you if that's a feeling shared by the others on this panel.
That's a great point. I think all the founders on this panel can relate to that. And I'm just looking at the list of our participants, 340 people in the audience, and I think certainly many of whom are founders or investors that can really relate to that. So thank you. Let's go to Jonathan next, and then Jungwoo, you're on deck.
Thanks, Yen. No, I appreciate Yen and Eric for brainstorming and putting this together and inviting, I think, a cohort of founders that I have a lot of really strong admiration for. So hopefully we can put together some useful discussion points today. So Coreshell, I'm Jonathan Tan. I'm the CEO, co-founder here at Coreshell. We're working on finding a replacement for graphite that is both lower cost and more scalable. So what we're doing is transforming a metallurgical, mechanically milled silicon that has both lower material cost and higher energy density or higher specific capacity. So you can use up to 10 times less of the material. And the benefit that that has is that we believe it's one of the few materials, not only that can be produced in the United States and in Europe, but actually be lower cost than Chinese graphite. So that's also a major industrial issue in terms of making batteries more affordable, which then leads to really the knock-on effects of downstream affordability for all the products that use batteries, especially electric vehicles and a lot of energy storage. And then also solves a major supply chain issue, as everyone's well aware. Graphite is almost solely sourced from one location, China, in the world. And so having an alternative to that that is both cost effective and produced abundantly, I think is pretty important, especially in this day and age. So we started back in 2017. Didn't start off as actually a silicon anode technology company, but really started off as a more of an artificial SEI company. So trying to solve the key degradation issues with a variety of different anode and cathode materials, and we had this sort of breakthrough on this very low cost and abundant silicon about 3 years ago, and that's really kind of taken on the full shape of the company these days. It's been our main focus. Yeah. It's interesting. Eric was talking about the sort of highs and lows. I will say that after running Coreshell for almost 8 years now, I feel way more dead inside. I know I was supposed to be a lot more
Jonathan's
positive.
used to this.
Didn't you just win like best startup in the world or something, Jonathan?
Yeah, and it barely made me happy for more than a few minutes, to be honest. I was actually, this is, well, me and 300 close friends here. I needed to go pee while I was on stage, and so I was actually kind of annoyed standing there. But no, it was a tremendous win.
Congratulations.
Maybe I'll I'll try to be more positive because we're supposed to be more positive during the call. But no, I would say that one of the things that I've learned, one, that batteries are incredibly hard. I think is one of the hardest things that you can start a company doing. But on the flip side, I do feel that the amount of impact that batteries have continue to grow every day. That continues to be true, more true today than it was when we first started. And that the companies that can make a substantial impact now, I think, will be the most lasting companies in this next phase. So I'm really excited about that, and I think amongst the four of us, I definitely see much more potential in this sort of new crop of battery technology companies coming out rather than maybe some of the ones that came before us, and we've definitely taken some of the lessons learned from that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room to grow in the future. So thank you, Jonathan. Jungwoo and then Chiru, you on deck.
All right. Thanks, Yan. And also, yeah, this was all Eric's doing, everyone. So everyone thank Eric for getting us all in a room.
Kudos to Eric.
Without him, we'd just all be in our own rooms crying with our sadness.
A true thought leader. Yes.
Sounds good. My name is Jungwoo Lee, CEO of South 8 Technologies. I guess before talking about South 8, I'll talk about sort of how I ended up here. And I think if we're talking about doom and gloom and sort of sadness, what I'll tell you is I cut my teeth in next-gen solar 15 years ago. Which had the the highest of highs and had a pretty much lowest of lows. And from that environment, what I can tell you is I'm actually very optimistic about batteries after that, because I actually do think that there's a path forward for next gen batteries. And that's what still gets me up in the morning and allowed me to sort of pivot into this industry and our path forward. But so South 8 Technologies is commercializing a new electrolyte material called liquefied gas electrolytes. And it came about, as with a lot of next-gen material ideas, is one, you start out with performance, thinking through what can we do new in material space that can push boundaries. And we use gases because you can improve stability, improve connectivity, improve resilience and safety. But then you also have to think about it from the macro lens, and what really inspired me to go commercial with it is the fact that it's a brand new supply chain independent of what battery infrastructure was already doing, and it's already globally distributed. Industrial gases are the backbone of most industries out there. We just don't think about it. So these factories already exist, and we're using materials that have already been scaled. We're simply using them in a new way that no one's done before, which is putting them into electrolyte formulations and injecting them into batteries. And so we have been going full time, I guess around similar to Jonathan, 2017, 2018 era, spun out of UC San Diego based on research that we had been doing, and have been growing ever since. I guess one of the key lessons of the last, I guess before I jump into that, is what I can say is we're doing a very staged go-to-market approach. And that's sort of one of my big lessons, is that you start out with a technology or deep technology, and you can say, the world is my oyster, we can do anything and everything under the sun. It took me, I'd argue, longer than maybe someone with a bit more wisdom as I'm now, is to go through, great, you can do all these things. What will you do first? So our first thing is a product launch at the end of the year, which is I'm gonna go simply, a lithium ion cell, cylindrical, focused on defense and aerospace, specifically soldier wear. And the main value proposition for that community is the fact that we can unlock ultra low temperature operation that no one else can do. And this is really targeting on the fact that the Arctic regime and the space regime and the underwater regime is opening up to a whole bunch of new use cases. Current lithium ion cells are not meeting their needs. And thus there is a very interesting opening for new technologies to establish themselves there. And then from there, that's our foundation to grow into more industrial areas, also focusing on extreme environment. And then, of course, we have one day visions of growth, large growth markets such as vehicles or grid storage. And we will get there, we know, but I think a part of this conversation is really understanding, and being honest with ourselves about that growth cycle and sort of how long it takes to establish new battery technologies and get to the scale needed and the adoption cycles that happen.
That's great. And Jungwoo, was there a lesson that you want to share with the audience today?
Yes.
Are you dead inside yet or not yet?
Depends on the day and how much I'm traveling, right? I finally came home yesterday, and I think one night of sleep in my own bed really helps. I think, and one of the key lessons, and I'm going to say this with the context of I'm a technical founder, right? And so what I'll say is, one key lesson is what my opinion is of what customers should do does not matter, right? The feedback from the customer about the value to them is king.
That's right. Yeah. We'll have a lot more conversation about that later in this conversation. Also, I've noticed that when you get, a critical mass of founders together, everyone starts commiserating about the lifestyle of being the founder. It's certainly not the coziest lifestyle.
It's not,
Chiru,
but I mean, there's
go
reason
ahead,
to do.
Jungwoo. Yes, go ahead, Chiru.
Thank you for inviting me, and this is someone on the comments. It is already the greatest panel ever. I would say there's some comfort that comes from going to people you know and deeply appreciate as co-panelists. Yeah, awesome to be here. My name is Chiru Gopal. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Mitra Chem, along with Vivas Kumar, who, as half the founders in the Bay Area do in the battery space, comes from Tesla and ran the lithium supply chain over there, total force of nature. And then Will Chu, who is our chief scientific advisor, professor of Stanford, and someone I've worked a long time with. Mitra, we were founded in 2021, in June of 2021. The story was, I came from building data science and software for battery development from my time at Toyota, and I'd worked with Will, who had a Toyota-funded project. Vivas came straight from a supply chain background, where he had seen the pain points and the supply chain choke points, and looked at materials development not purely as a technology play, but as a strategic supply chain de-risking play. And we sort of brought our heads together and decided that focusing on battery materials as a first entry point in a company is going to be key. And more importantly, making the material, not purely doing R&D as a service or software as a service, was key for us in terms of making a big impact. And then we had to choose, where do we want to stand? And we just saw a lot of work already going into the anode space, silicon anodes, lithium metal side of things as well. And we decided to make batteries lower cost and not necessarily differentiate only on performance. Cathode and lowering the cost of cathodes is key. And that sort of led us into going in from nickel and cobalt for multiple reasons, and LFPS, as Jungwoo said, entering the market with something that can be deployed soon and at scale is key. And we chose LFP as our wedge to enter the market. But broadly, we view ourselves as a material science company at heart. A lot of the skills are translatable. Our first sort of go-to-market is to make LFP at scale, and we are doing this with the support of the U.S. government with a DOE-funded grant, still holding, which is great. And our start of production is slated for 2027. Work is going well there. We have a portfolio of materials, higher energy density materials that will get layered on after that. And I think this will lead sort of into what the one lesson is, right? Which is, oftentimes as a founder, I'll say the one word, humility, is the biggest lesson I've learned, which is important. As a founder, like you said, you want to move the world, shake the world, and do something very big. But what you need is a small part of what your customer wants, and a customer wants a product that works today. But especially if you're building a deep tech company in something like battery materials, you have to think even one step beyond the customer, which is geopolitics, right? So how does geopolitics, trade policy intersect with changing supply chain trends and what the customers want? And there, on one hand, it can seem like doom and gloom, that what you do is so inconsequential compared to what is happening at the grand stage. But this is where I think what I have learned and what we have tried to convey to our team is humility and transparency about, like, the biggest asset we have as a 50% company is speed and agility. So how do we, be time efficient? Speed matters more than anything else, whether it's for R&D, launching a product, or to scale up. Speed is key, and being capital efficient is super key to being resilient and surviving in this landscape, right? So how do we time efficiently scale up and cost efficiently scale up? And that, to me, is going to be the big part of how we compete with someone like China, where not just technology, but big industrial complexes are built.
Chiru, thank you so much. That's a great segue to my first discussion topic, which is creatively named revenue versus renderings. So I'll give some context, and I'd love to have a productive conversation about it as a group. I think in reflecting on questions to ask this group of incredible founders, I think back to 5 years ago, when we were speaking to investors, back in the day, conversations were almost exclusively focused on, cutting edge technology, on scaling, on funding mega projects. But today, conversations with investors is more often about evolving business models. So for example, there's less capital today funding Gigafactories compared to before, and more business models that focus on revenue generation. So my question for you is, in your journey as a startup founder and running your company, where did your first dollar come from? What does it look like? Does it look like pilots, tolling, licensing services? So I'd love to hear from perhaps each of you on where did you get your where did you find your first revenue? And then additional to where did the first dollar come from? What are the lessons learned in terms of structuring SOWs, metrics, pricing, so that proof of concepts turn into real revenue that's recurring? All right, so let's been picking on Eric, so let's start with Eric.
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. So when we started the company, it was April 2023, and I don't know if you guys remember, but that was not a good year to raise money. It was kind of a depressed funding environment, and so the name of the game for us was how can we get to revenue as early as possible, right? And so it was less about raising a ton of money and going for a home run, and more about, starting in some sense, in a way that it maybe sound boring or that could potentially lack vision. And so what we did is, so we have two business models, and we started with the first one, which is called Scan on Demand. And Scan on Demand is a business model where you can send us your battery cells, and we'll scan them for you, and then we'll apply our technology to those scans to improve their image quality, and then upload them on a web application that we call the Glimpse Portal, and you can review the inside of your cell. And there's plenty of use cases for it. Don't want to put Jungwoo on the spot, but this is something that we help with a lot of startups, and this is a very non-scary business model, because you pay as you go. There's no subscription. It's we try and make it very cost effective, and we try and really think about what's the barrier to entry to try our technology, and let's reduce that as much as possible, both in terms of price, in terms of sort of turnaround, in terms of customer experience, and so on. And so that was our way to generate revenue. We're able to do this in about 5 to 6 months after starting the company. And I mean, I'm gonna state the obvious in startup world, but it forces you to be really disciplined and go to market early and get feedback from your customers early. Now, I realize that I'm probably the only I'm the only software startup on this panel, right? So it's not always easy to do this, so I'm very aware of it. So we leverage the fact that with software, you can go to market a little early, you can build your technology much faster. But I think there's a world in which, if we had raised in 2020, we might have gone for the home run, which is, deploying our solution at the customer's premise and selling a subscription, which we learn with no surprise that this takes many, many months, right? It's a long sales cycle. And so I think, and in retrospect, it was the right thing to do, to, go to market early, get feedback from customers, get out there. And it was a little scary, but it turned out to be the right thing to do, because we learned a ton, and I think we would probably have had a lower learning rate had we gone for the subscription business model with the large customers right on.
Great, thank you, Eric. Let's go to Jungwoo and then Jonathan.
Yeah, and I think, Yen, your question was your first dollar. And I think something that the team and everyone in this room should acknowledge is that there's different flavors of dollars. And right, what kinds of dollars you're optimizing for has shifted a lot. I think what you're alluding to, Yen, is that, about 5 years ago, at least in the sort of material side, our dollars were coming from either government agencies or I'm going to call them NREs, some development programs of some sort, right? And this is really, I think, in Eric's verbiage, is going for those home runs. What are these big dreams that we're building step by step by step? And someone big is paying us to do POCs, as in proof of concept validation works. The standard is, all right, show me a different kind of dollar, a revenue dollar. a sales dollar.
That's a
And
big
so
change from when we all got started.
yeah, and the mentality is shifting as well. And I think it's similar to what Eric alluded to. There's a difference between saying, okay, this is a development dollar for something that could be done one day versus a sales dollar of something that you are doing right now. And what Eric did is actually quite beautiful. And I will continue to plug for Glimpse. Is what I can tell you is this: one, Eric doesn't make very much money off me. I know that. But what Eric does is solve a really big problem for me, which is I don't have $1 million to spend on a CT scanner, but I need that data. And his team has put together a really elegant business model where it's mutually beneficial, right? I get the data I need in order to continue to do product development and quality, and Eric refines the software and builds out, a customer service team and a whole operation. Our first dollar at South8 came from a similar journey of saying, okay, let's narrow our scope a bit. We started out as with, I'm going to go with not everyone, but most people about 5 years ago, we were a lithium metal battery company, guys. Remember that?
Yeah.
Big dreams, because it's also, I still fundamentally believe as a material system, we can make lithium metal batteries. 4 of us in a lab somewhere could not make a lithium metal battery to send to a customer for the life of us. It's just complicated supply chain, operations. So what we did is we pivoted and said, hey, we can demonstrate our first product in lithium ion. Simply go to a toll manufacturer, get electrodes wound, slap together with, in a very bubblegum toothpick MVP level of a cell, put a material in there and send them to customers. And we did. We sent them to customers across different, markets, from grid, vehicles, defense, aerospace, power tools. And we started learning, okay, who wants this? What we have today. And what I can tell you is no one's selling that version of it, but we learned what they want and how to grow. And, a few years later, now we are going with our first actual refined, not bubblegum toothpick, but actually, fully validated, qualified product in that space. And so that's the thing is like, what we learned along the way is, who is willing to take that first leap of buying that first MVP product and showing what can be done, and is going to be on that journey with you, because it's still a learning cycle, right? It's just a faster learning cycle that'll get you to revenue in the near term, and it also shows you what value are you generating today from either a performance or a cost or service perspective.
Great point, Jungwoo. Jonathan and Chiru.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic topic of conversation, and I echo the sentiment that Jungwoo just said, which is that the industry for the past couple of years, I think investors have just got burned on companies who have solely subsisted on what I would call, development projects or NRE
Building
dollars,
scale.
building scale. And what's interesting is that out of the panelists here, Coreshell is still probably the one that's going for just the biggest sort of swing still, I would say, just in terms of the fact that not that we're, more differentiated than what South8 is building, but our main targets are still the automotive customers, right? We still have most of our customer base being those automotives. And we still do have a lot of, I would say, NRE money, right? That is the major basis for our money. And that was the first dollar in. So, like a lot of folks, a lot of our first dollars were these POC dollars coming in from, demonstrating that we could do a development type of project. What I will say, though, is that I fully agree that the market these days, for us, that is not enough, right? Showing that you just have development dollars and that you're subsisting on these sort of development contracts is not enough for the market to really say, this is something that I really want to make a bet into. And I will say that I think for Coreshell, we were fortunate enough, I think, about 3 years ago to kind of recognize that we wanted to demonstrate full product, not just a innovation or a technology or a new material, but an actual full product and get that to scale. And that wasn't easy. That's not an easy choice, because really what it meant is that we had to build a full battery cell facility. Like, I don't want to be Northvolt. I don't want to be a large scale Gigafactory producer, but I still felt the real key need especially if we're going to make this, leap of try to, cross this leap of faith of convincing folks that our chemistry could be a wholesale replacement for graphite. I needed to show proof of that in a full product. And I'm really happy that we chose that route 3 years ago, because I really believe that if we hadn't, we'd probably be dead in the water now. But since we did, we built a full cell facility. We're building full 60 amp hour automotive sized battery cells. We're actually shipping that as commercial product to other industries. In terms of robotics, we have contracts now with electric aviation companies. We've been working on DoD contracts as well, much like South 8. And I really think that that has become a crucial part of what the market needs to see, is that people are tired of the sort of concept of a future dream of battery technologies, and they've been burned way too long. And I think right now is an incredibly important time to show that you can make something and deliver it, and somebody's going to buy it into the actual product and put it in something that they're going to use, not just kind of test it and, do more testing and, have something 5 years down the road. So it's not even just the revenue, but it's the real, signal of what that revenue means now that I think is just as important. And even though I think it actually makes things probably a little harder for, companies that are trying to make real breakthrough technologies, I actually believe that it's actually better. It'll be better for us as an industry. It'll be better for folks who are building companies to be forced to think about, how do I get to an actual product that people want to buy and spend dollars around, versus subsisting on, government grants or development contracts, almost endlessly, because a lot of that stuff, I believe, is not going to justify the returns. They're not going to get those technologies are never going to get the ROIs. And there's been a lot of misspent dollars in those regards.
Absolutely, kind of efficiently allocating capital, both private and public ones. Yeah, that's a good point. Chiru.
Yeah, the difficulty of going last is often you have to say something that's even slightly differentiated from that.
That's okay if you have the same experience as everyone.
I mean, Jungwoo put it brilliantly, right? It's not just where the dollar came from, but what is the value of the dollar towards future dollars that you will earn? Like one of the big decisions we made. So we started in 2021. It took us about 7 months to build the lab and have it fully functional and all that, right? Was like, it was kind of an arbitrary goal, but we said, we can afford, we had the same fork in the road that Jonathan mentions, wherein we had developed, we thought LFP will get leapfrogged. So we had an improved material, but the TRL level was low. And we started iterating with customers quickly on sample this. The question, it was like an additive stack of risks, technology risks, plus engineering risk, plus execution and then financing risk, right? And it was a huge stack of risks. And it became very clear that resolving each of these risks sequentially just meant it's going to be, again, an 8 to 10 year timeline for us as a company to get a completely technology differentiated product in the market. So we said, okay, well, if we have to choose what works today, and there is still no other solution other than sourcing from China for LFP. So we started, as you can imagine, with LMFP and even higher energy density cathodes, right? So we had a little bit of a composition approach. So our first money, as you would expect, came from some sort of a statement of work and NRD work that we were doing with some of our strategic investors and partners. But again, the question always was like, how we could take the capital to do the work, but it's also opportunity cost towards generating sustainable at scale revenue in the future. So the angle that we took was, let's make a new set of decisions, which is, if we had to profitably build a company making LFP, we of course need to have the latest Gen 4, whatever China does, that at that level, if not plus, when slightly better. But how do we de-risk execution by choosing manufacturing partners to go with? How do we de-risk execution at scale by not having to build a pilot ourselves, because that is not time efficient or cost efficient? So how do we actually work with existing equipment vendors or partners in Asia to be able to scale up production, right? So that allowed us to basically, I would say, short circuit a couple of years in terms of, spending time building a pilot plant itself to get to where we are essentially, right? So I don't anticipate our sustainable revenue in the future to come from some of these NRE contracts we took early on, but they are incredibly important in terms of building trust with customers, that you're willing to hear them, make the changes needed, and able to actually produce something that they want today.
That's great. Thank you, Chiru. This is a great lead up to my next question. So first we talked about revenue. Next, I want to talk about best practices to scale. So Chiru, you mentioned a couple of things like building versus buying, different kind of tips and tricks to help companies scale efficiently, quickly, and go into market faster. So I want to pick you guys' brain. I think many of you have gone through this decision process of, do I build a line? How do I build it? Do I contract it out? So things like pilot lines, contract manufacturing, sharing facilities. So just want to open it up to see any tips and tricks, practical things that maybe there's 400 people on the call now, so perhaps other battery founders can help them see around the corner for how to efficiently and effectively scale. Jonathan, yeah.
I'll go first because I think actually I want to make something. I want to say something to Chiru's point. I didn't want to build a battery line. Actually, I would recommend most people on this line, even though I just said like that was such a critical decision. It was a critical decision that we made because we tried contract manufacturing here in the United States to build products, and it didn't work.
It. Okay. It didn't
We
work.
tried
Oh
it.
my goodness.
We
Okay.
didn't work.
That's
Like
good to
there is
know. Yeah.
there's essentially almost no contract manufacturing in the United States for battery cells at scale. There's a bunch of R&D lines and small prototype lines, but there's no real contract manufacturing at any sort of size and scale. And the ones that even can do even a little bit of scale, they're so impacted in terms of you can get on their line once every 6 months maybe, that you cannot do real process development, right? And you have to go overseas and you have to go essentially find something. So I would, if I were starting a company, honestly, I would probably prefer to go to the route that, Mitra and other folks did, because it is, in my opinion, a faster pathway to market. It's by far, going to be more capital and speed efficient, and will get you there faster. I think that being said, I think it's imperative to think about two things. One is that you have to find the strategy that works for your company, and you have to find exactly, how do you again try to get to that first product as best as you can, try to deliver upon that as best as you can, and I think that's going to be a little bit different. And Jungwoo and I have had this discussion. I think we've kind of both gone the route of, well, because we're making such differentiated chemistries, it's really hard to find folks that can be real, contract manufacturers for a new chemistry where you have to really engineer everything, all the different components that go into it in a way and really show it off. But then the other thing that I think I've been an advocate for here in the United States quite a lot is, as an ecosystem, we need to find we need to find more partnerships in the space to be able to kind of pull together resources in ways, because we do lack a lot of the resources that a lot of other countries like China and Asia, where they have a lot more contract manufacturing, a lot more resources. The US just doesn't have that. And I think that is to our detriment. And so I think it is imperative that people find those things and then also partner together. Hopefully this group, the four of us have become very friendly and shared resources. And I think we have probably a lot of connections to a lot of folks on the call as well. But I think it's imperative for folks to find those and to be able to share those and not be so necessarily possessive over one thing or next, because I think it is going to be the combined of that is going to be really important for us to try to compete with a lot of the ecosystems that have been built otherwise. And then, just try to continue to build more of an ecosystem in the United States to compete. And I say Yen all off, so hopefully somebody else can jump in and talk while Yen.
If I can go after, I think very astute remark, Jonathan. You got to pick a strategy that works for you. I think there is no one size sort of fits all on the scale up strategy. I think for us, again, the fact that we both took sort of slightly different forks in the road, I think we chose to go with a material which technically the infrastructure exists somewhere, not in the US again, right? Which is why we also chose, like, there is almost all the equipment that we will source to build the plant will come out of Korea, Germany, or China, for example. And that's something which people forget about is the bar, not just from investment has gone up, the bar from the customers has gone up as well in terms of readiness and how for the full package has to be ready. You make the best product, the best price, using the best equipment. So a part which we don't think as much about in the US is the importance of equipment and equipment innovation in actually driving product innovation and process innovation as well. And to us, actually working alongside the state of the art and the equipment, having horizontal and a vertical mill to be able to compare has been instrumental in understanding how do we not just make the best material, but at the lowest time or cost possible, right? So that's why, like, and it doesn't take too much time or money to actually experiment with it. If it doesn't work for you, you can quickly disband it and build your own line. But I would say, I would almost militantly, I would do this again. Like, if you're doing a first of a kind thing in the US somewhere else, like, do it in a low cost geography ideally, and where equipment already to source and build this or the ecosystem, that's the keyword, exists. That could shave a lot. And like our board basically just said, we're not going to let you build a pilot plant in 2023, which actually forced us to go down the strategy partly as well. And we're deploying the same thing on a manufacturing, plant build out too. It is no capital deployment till you have an offtake that's firm enough. To get that offtake, you need to be able to make the material in a production ready plant with the best equipment, with the same design that you're going to build in the US, right? So that's sort of the standard to which you have to go to. So if I fool around with a precursor that works in the lab that doesn't scale, then I have to start the process. You get one shot with most of these big customers, and you don't want to screw it up, basically, right? So getting all that done at the right scale is super key.
And then, Chiru, if I may ask, for you to have closed your deal with your customers, how far upstream did you have to go in terms of performance validation? Did you have to was it enough for you to deliver powder, or did you have to deliver them the whole tech stack?
A bit of both. I think the onus goes up. So although we make powders, we have essentially a semi-pilot line dry room. So maybe Jonathan, I kind of lied. We do have a semi-automated pod cell line in-house to build cells. We do always make larger ampere format. We do our own internal qualification, which mimics what each of our customers want, basically, and we provide that as a big data sheet. But almost always that us making cells doesn't matter because it's always a proprietary electrolyte formulation that the customer has, basically, and their own testing protocols, right? So we normally just ship a pellet of powder and then data that we've collected on large format cells.
I have a next question to kind of stir the pot a bit for this group. The next question is a little bit more abstract, and it's about things that haven't, maybe it's happening a little bit and maybe can be improved in the future. It's about partnerships. The US battery ecosystem, contrasting to, say, the Asian ones, we don't have vertically integrated giant battery companies. So to succeed, it sort of by definition requires us to work together and partner with one another, because almost no one of us can do everything by ourselves. So the question is, what are your thoughts on how battery companies can best partner with one another, either across the value chain or even as competitors? So I'll just throw that question in the pond.
I think, Yen, you dropped off when Jonathan was advocating for this exact same path.
Partnerships, yes. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I guess since I kind of first brought it up, but it was also something, we talked about early on when we were, preparing for this meeting. I do think that the partnership angle and the ecosystem building is really important because it is really hard to be able to build a full tech stack on your own, right? To actually have to build that whole thing on your own is incredibly challenging. And we would know we've kind of had to do a little bit of
We've all
that
tried it a little bit, yeah.
to a certain extent. But one thing that you mentioned, Yan, that I think is probably good to focus on is that you know, even within the same spaces, like for example, we know some of the other silicon anode technology companies out there, and I've shared resources with them. We've talked about even banding together as a cooperation to really talk about how do we advocate for resources as a collective. And I do think that there needs to be more of that in a way that I think we can all agree battery technologies here in the United States and in other places in Europe and other ways it does need to have a little bit more of a rising tide lift all boats mentality here because we're all essentially kind of all competing against Chinese product at the moment, if I'm going to be honest. Like we are kind of all in the same boat of competing against that. So there is a sense that if we can partner together and work together, and hopefully now, that a lot of folks have built up more resources, there can be a little bit more partner sharing in terms of actually building things. And I saw that someone in the comment talked about Volta Explorer, and we know those guys as well. There are folks that now have started to build up lines, and hopefully moving forward, there will actually be more, full tech stack contract manufacturing options that become more available. So hopefully it makes more available partnerships, but at the very moment, sharing ideas, sharing strategies, even just kind of talking about what's working and what our customers are really looking for, I think is valuable on its own.
Yeah, I think discussions like this is a good first step. You got to get people to start talking before they, can collaborate and make partnerships.
Yeah, and I think, and something we should recognize is that, we all made our choices a few years ago because the ecosystem didn't exist, right? As Jonathan said, the lines that were available to us were great for R&D. You can make small batches, small, capacity cells, just prove certain things work. But, we all built our lines once you entered the world of process development where you needed repeatability, you needed that control. And you needed to sort of prove to the customer that repeatability there. I think the landscape has shifted in the last few years, and it's going to continue to shift, right? Even in California, I think they're investing in a few other resources. And so I think that's actually great. Like once those become available, if they come to fruit the way that we anticipate, because I think similar to Jonathan, I do not wish anyone to build a line if they don't need to. But if you need to, which you may, depending on your tech stack, and that's an honest conversation you need to have, right?
Yeah,
we can be very naive in early days of saying we're a drop-in replacement when we're not. But that's something you want to learn as quickly as possible, and then contain that risk.
Eric, and then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, I was react to what John was saying is I don't think, especially at our stage, I don't think anyone has a time issue, right? The target addressable market is huge, right? Like the consumption of batteries in the US is orders of magnitude beyond what we would hope to generate revenue within in the next couple years, the next few years. And they're also, I think we tend to forget, the electric vehicle industry has been a little down, but there are fast-growing other fast-growing markets that with potentially higher margins, that we could sell into. You think about airborne application, you think about stationary storage systems, you think about space. All those are very battery hungry applications, and they're very exciting and they're growing quickly. So because you're not really competing for market share, you just competing against China, if you will, or competing against physics, maybe is another way to put it. I think there's all the arguments in the world to say, no one in the industry, even if they're trying to build the same product as you, as your competitor, right? Because there's so much space for everyone to grow into, and the hard things is just scale a product that is sellable right? Not just a POC, but something you can sell and deliver value to your end customers that's going to be happy. And it, like, I would call that real revenue, right? And and if that means helping each other in terms of shared resources, shared learnings, I think that makes a ton of sense. And a glimpse, our version of this is, and honestly, when we started, this might not have been my philosophy, but now it's like, we don't really have competitors, even if, there's other companies that provide quality control technologies. There's a lot of flavors of this. You don't have to use X-ray, you can use ultrasound, etc. I think we've done a good job of showing that we're not your enemy, right? Even if we might be selling into the same market and potentially talking to the same customers, uh, maybe even in some cases going for the same budget. There's so much room, and I think we should help each other. And that might sound naive, but help each other, share the learnings, and find ways to collaborate way more than retaining information and thinking really competing against other startups, because that actually feels somewhat naive. If you think you're competing against other startups, you're probably um, thinking you're more successful and bigger than you actually are.
Yeah, I think that's something, kind of coming from the Volta side is almost a universal predisposition for companies that we work with is there's a lot of mm, recognition that, partnerships and collaboration is going to be critical for the success of the entire ecosystem. So I think everyone kind of nods their head at that. Yeah. Chiru, quickly, and then we'll go to the next question.
Sure, yeah. Wanted to go back to sort of what I started with, which is building a deep tech company in the battery space. By definition, it's not enough to just think about revenue and what your customers want. That's important, but also there is a higher element around the geopolitics and the trade policy, right? So
Yeah.
one thing, by definition, these companies are international, even if we think about that we're wanting to localize some amount of supply, right? So I think one aspect around partnerships to us has been, it's not just, so for us, supply chain is key. If we're going to rely for all of the materials, again, go back to China, then we're not solving a problem for our customers. Right? So how do we use materials not from China to still be able to build a material on par with the best product and at the best cost? So that's forced us to look for supply chain partners outside China as well. And the way we think about this is ultimately what your customers want is not just a fully made in the US product or made in China product. It's going to be some sort of a supply chain diversification. That's going to be supply diversification that's needed. So again, it's not a question of competing. It's a question of you can't do it all alone. So how do you work with your supply partners? Because at some point they want to be closer to the customer because that's where all of the margins are, right? The end customer. Your end customers want a problem solved. So the closer you are to that problem, that's also better. So we have chosen to form partnerships, not both parallel to us, meaning manufacturing partnerships, downstream with our customers as well. And more importantly, upstream, which is often ignored. Upstream to me means material suppliers coming into camp for us, essentially, right?
I love that.
It's how we believe we can actually not just compete, but even get close to replicating what China has done. And I don't mean to be fatalistic at all. I think it's a challenge that we should solve. I think we have to be realistic that we're not going to be 100% divested from that. That is going to be a finite amount of supply that gets carved out from China just as an insurance policy for a lot of the companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed, I think there's a lot of consensus in this group, which is new, actually. I think I've been in the batteries industry for more than 10 years, and I think more and more there's more consensus over time. A couple of things I think I want to summarize in just this conversation is competition is global, that the battery industry itself is inherently global, and we need to sort of look at our challenges in that lens. That partnerships and collaboration is critical for the health of the ecosystem. So I'm glad that we have all this consensus. I'm looking at a audience question that I suspect that we'll have a consensus answer to. So I'll start with an easy one. So there's a question from the audience, and I quote, "How useful is public funding at this point? Is the industry mature enough to survive without it?" Maybe I'll go around. Does anyone maybe we can just raise our hands. I think there's consensus here. Public funding is critical, I think. Right? Yeah. Anyone disagrees? Yeah, we need public support. We can't compete on
Yeah,
our own without, yeah.
I'll mention one thing though. I think we all agree public funding is really important. It is, obviously China offers a lot of it in ways that I think are better than the United States, thinking about sort of the vertical stack rather than independent sort of segments of it. I think the US can be better about its holistic strategy in terms of public funding. One thing that I will mention is that we do need to find a pathway for technologies to exist long term without the need for being fully subsidized, right? Any industry that is just existing on the subsidies or the tariffs is not a sustainable long-term industry. So it is important for folks to find inherent value, right? Find inherent value. And that's what I would encourage folks in the audience to think about when they're starting, if they are starting a new technologies, find inherent long-term value. Not just be reliant on sort of, administration whims, because that's one of the lessons that I think we've all learned is that if you are fully reliant on an administration policy, especially here in the United States, then you are going to be at risk for whatever comes next around the corner. So that's not a good policy or strategy for a company to build off.
I think to sort of build on what Jonathan said, while we all agree public funding is important, I think what's more important than public funding is certainty. Right? If that's not an option, again, we can live through that, but we need to understand the landscape and build off that. Poor Chiru over there, is the DOE funding coming or not coming? Maybe it's coming, maybe not, right?
That's not a Chiru problem. That's everybody's having that problem. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it makes it really hard to plan long term when you're not sure what the policies will be.
But I think the key thing, underlying thing, is building an ecosystem. I think that's a key word here. Building an ecosystem to make batteries. Is a system at scale means you need all the components. Otherwise, you're again going back on supply chain routes. That takes time and patience. A time that is significantly longer. Time costs longer than good policy or bad policy and administrative cycles in the US, basically, right? So on one hand, the public funding is at least to me an indication to the markets that is interest from the government. But like Jungwoo said, if it's not resilient, if it's not certain, then that's exactly what I see in the private market. Is like public funding alone doesn't mean very much. At the end of the day, as Jonathan said, do you actually have a customer giving you an offtake? Because without that, then the public funding doesn't matter.
That's right. I think that applies on the individual company level, getting, CBIR support all the way to, being profitable. And then also as a country or like an ecosystem level, being supported by taxpayers, but also have a strategy that, this is industrial strategy to get us to be competitive. And I think being able to enunciate, sort of clarify that is really important. I realize that we are almost at time, so I will do a lightning round, just a quick question. I noticed in the comments, there's quite a few folks mentioning about pilot facilities, share use facilities, really great efforts that are being underway right now. For a lightning round, I'd love to go across the room and I will give each of you one magic wand. And if you can wish for one facility or platform or resource, whether it is a pilot line or standardized data sheets or test data, sort of supply chain transparency, traceability, anything like that. I'll give you a magic wand and for the health of the ecosystem, what would you wish for? So I'll go Eric, Jonathan, Chiru, and then Jungwoo. So Eric.
Yeah, a state-sponsored pilot facility, maybe let's just say in wherever you have clusters of battery startups. So Boston is one of them, California is another one. There are a couple others where you can come in and have not only time to produce some cells and have the expertise, both human and I guess mostly human, but also the right machines to do so, but also have time to iterate, right? Because I think whether your product's dropping or not is not always a fully fleshed out answer in the early stages of a company. And so you kind of need to figure it out and answer that question for yourself, right? And that can get very costly. So huge fan of those sort of pilot facility. And we have a number of customers, large and small, that are dying to find those facilities in the US. And oftentimes, I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying there's not enough of them and they don't have enough capacity. And oftentimes when you want to produce not just 100 cells, but 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 of cells, you have to go abroad, and that kills your velocity because you have to wait for those cells to be built abroad and then shipped here, and then there's a barrier language and so on. So I think if you spend $1 billion if you spend $1 billion of taxpayer money today in the US to help the battery industry, like build 2 or 3 or 4 of those lines and staff them up with experts.
That's great. Jonathan, and then Chiru.
Yeah, I fully agree with Eric, and I've actually worked with a number of groups. We supported Brandon and Richard on that California grant that they just recently wanted to build a pilot scale facility. I'll say a couple of things. One, the US has enough small facilities. It does not have the sort of medium and slightly larger facilities, right? That is a huge gap that's missing out here. There's not, like Eric mentioned, it's pretty easy. You can build a few cells in a lot of different places. You can't build the volume. And the reason why that matters is that, as people have talked about here, customers are not just looking for the product, but they're looking for how you manufacture that product. And is that manufacturing scalable? And the only way to test that is on a line that has the sort of similar manufacturing processes. The other thing that I will mention that would be helpful, that I don't think the industry currently has right now, is more clear sort of stage gates on what needs to happen in order for technologies to really kind of progress through those things. I mean, people talk about A, B, C samples, and once we've gotten into it, it's actually very unclear those sort of standards. And I think even being able to clearly articulate those to folks so that they know where they are and what their goalposts need to be. Mentioning, one of the things I think should be included is that manufacturing, aspect of those things, because that's what customers are grading on, but that's not what has been talked about very much in the industry. So I think everyone knows what the end goal, long distance goal is, but those sort of stage gates, if we had those, I think would actually help the industry quite a bit.
And the best practices playbooks. Yeah. Chiru and then Jungwoo.
Yeah.
Magic one.
Yes. Jonathan, it's funny you say the sample names, right? We've had the spectrum of what is a B sample. Someone told us it's off the pilot. One person said it's off your own self-owned production line that can make several kilotons. Magic one. I feel that innovations at least in the US, often get hampered because it's a systems integration challenge. Like I can make the best material, but the onus is on them, like Jonathan said, onus is on me to develop a full cell around it. But then LG, Samsung, and then the small US defense contractors have very different requirements. What would be great is sort of an industry complex, maybe like a pilot line, not for a cell, but a material, and the ability to actually prototype technologies at the relevant scale to de-risk that valley of death for any change, any step change, right? Like inherently, like it's a competition between revolutionary and sort of evolutionary changes in this field. So to me, again, adding on to the whole pilot line theme is sort of how do we solve systems integration at the pilot scale, essentially.
Thank you, Chiru. Jungwoo.
Yeah, I'm gonna do like asterisks to what everyone said. All right, so what I would want is for Eric's pilot line to be staffed by the industry veterans from Asia, not by whoever we're about to hire over here.
Yeah, not by people who's never done it before. Yeah.
Exactly. And then two, for Chira, what I would like to do is on top of this pilot facility, we can actually build a robust, reliable techno-economic model where Chira can simply input his material properties, and then we can actually output cell performance and manufacturing ability.
Yeah, love that. All right, folks, we're a little bit over time, so thank you so much for spending the hour with us. There's a lot to digest and mull over. We'll be sending the recording resources to everyone in the audience shortly, and the recording will be on YouTube. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully this is just the beginning of fruitful conversations on collaboration and helping the ecosystem succeed.
Thank you, Yan, for moderating. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.